So to start with, I think we've seen a very clear evolution in the relationship in the past week or so, with the president escalating his rhetoric and increasingly putting pressure on India to come to the table and bring a bigger package for trade negotiations. And you might be surprised that we're saying trade negotiations here when obviously the top line seems to be related to Russia. But while there's certainly, a question out there as to whether the president really is focused on Russia and that's what's driving his escalation on this question of Indian oil imports, our take is that this is about leverage in the now increasingly difficult trade negotiations with India that have been dragging on since actually before the April 2nd announcements of reciprocal tariffs starting in early February. And, Trump, as we've seen time and time again, is out there seeking to escalate to get better leverage at the table and get India where he wants them. Now, for everyone keeping track, India has emerged as a major, potential partner for the United States and a major opportunity to push back on China's dominance in both manufacturing and global trade. And the Biden administration spent significant effort to try and pull the Indians out of their general non-aligned position into a position where they're closer to the United States, and doing that through advanced technology cooperation, through the major developments in co-manufacturing, including of advanced jet engines, all designed to bring India within the fold. But here we are, with New Delhi really shocked by how the president has turned things around.
I want to ask about the Russian oil imports, and it reminds me to some extent of Iran and China. We all remember hearing the president say, like multiple times, that he doesn't mind if China buys Iranian oil after the U.S. attacks. And then all of a sudden, when Bessent and Greer go to negotiate with China, they're angry that China's buying Iranian oil, even though the president of the United States said they could. In terms of India, right, we have put sanctions on Russian oil, and so have the Europeans. And yet, it's been clear to everybody all along that India buys the oil from the Russians, refines it, and then turns around and sells those refined products back to Europe. This is kind of like an emperor wears no clothes thing, isn't it? I mean, was anyone surprised?
So to be clear, India's purchases fall within a loophole that was designed by the U.S. and the EU as they set out their sanctions regime against the Russians. These are not illegal purchases. And so the idea here was to actually both cushion the broader oil market and ensure stability, which was a key goal not only of the Biden administration, but obviously of the Trump administration as well. And at the same time, kind of diversify some of the oil refining away from China and decrease some of the profits from China and push those to India and enable some of that oil to still flow to Europe, which was necessary as they continue to transition away from Russian fuel.
But the idea was to stop revenues going to Vladimir Putin so that he couldn't fund weapons to attack Ukraine, right? And then Europe ends up actually doing that through this loophole.
Correct. Now, this did fall within the price cap that was established to try and ensure that they were not getting outsized benefits. But from the start, the EU and the United States took a position to not go after oil imports writ large because of the massive reliance not only of Europe, but of the global market on Russian oil.
All right. So how important is the trade relationship between U.S. and India? And I asked that after having talked to Mark Gurman yesterday. We know Apple iPhones are now made in India, and we've increasingly seen Apple trying to diversify its supply chain. So it is important in terms of how it might impact certainly the United States and the U.S. consumer. What do we need to know? Give me some size and scope so we understand what's at stake here.
So you kind of hit the nail on the head right there, which is the prospects of India-U.S. trade are significant. And particularly as we look to push, as the United States looks to push manufacturing and other production out of China, India has been this massive potential for taking over particularly some of this electronics production and filling lots of gaps that the Chinese currently fill. But in the current situation with tariffs set to rise to 25%, there's a real risk here to the amount of goods that can really come out of India and be competitive. Bloomberg Economics sees a potential drop of over 30% 30% of exports from India to the United States, which could amount to almost a 0.6% drop in Indian GDP over the medium term. And that's just based on the bilateral relationship and doesn't take into account the reality of the new tariff rates for other regional competitors like Vietnam, which are now locked in at a lower 20% and may become even more competitive, further undermining the Indian market. So I think we haven't yet seen how bad this can get. And the Indians are certainly focused on still getting to a deal while holding their ground.